Most of literature has been, in the last century, about victims. I mean, Kafka is a quintessential sort of author. It's about somebody against whom there are powers, and he doesn't know where they are, where they're coming from, and they come in on him like this. I am a little bit against the grain, à rebours, is Huysman's famous title. I'm against the grain. I don't write about victims so much as I write about the people who have power, who exert the power, and who put the power against other people. And in this way, I think, at least in American literature, I have been rather unique in that I'm one of the few people who understands, writers, that is, who understands how power works, and I write about it, and how the power is used to make people do things they don't want to do. Usually those who write about love, how should I put this tactfully? They are victims. Well, the first book was called Williwaw, which is an Indian word that means hurricane. It's a sea story. And I was 19, and I was the first mate of an army ship in the Aleutian Islands. And when I was off duty, off watch, I wrote a story about somebody on a boat in the Aleutian Islands. So in other words, one writes about what one knows about. I was then 19, and this must have been about 1940, I think it was the winter of 44, 45. And in 45, I was back in New York, still in the Army, and the book was published in March of 1946, and was very well received. It didn't have much success with the public. Then came In the Yellow Wood in 1947. Not much success. And then in 1948, when I was 22 years old, I wrote The City and the Pillar, and that was my first, as they say, international success. And it still goes on and on and on. You know, as I said off camera, but I will now confide it to the camera, that I am the least personal of writers. I said, except for certain early works, which I have suppressed. In the Yellow Wood, nobody will ever get a copy of, if I can help it. The Season of Comfort, which must be the worst novel ever written, was my fourth or fifth book. I have suppressed that. The City and the Pillar has nothing of me in it. It was the first story about openly homosexual protagonists who were completely all-American, manly boys, one in the Navy, the other a professional athlete. And one was in love with the other, and it was a tragic story, not because they were homosexual so much. Actually, one was bisexual and one was not. But it was sad because it was romantic. Those who put their entire lives onto one other person, be it male or female, are going to be disappointed. I'm not saying that heterosexuals make better slaves than homosexuals. Each has a tendency to be a slave, and each has a tendency to be a master. It's all economics, that as soon as a man has a wife and children, he becomes quite obedient. He doesn't ask for more wages, let's say. He's got to think very seriously whether he wants to lose his job or not. It's simply a means of keeping control, creating more workers, creating more consumers. And that is why it is very much to the advantage of the rulers of the country to keep everybody in husband, wife, children categories. There is no such thing as a homosexual personality, because if there was, you'd have to say there was a heterosexual personality. In that case, you would have to say that Adolf Hitler and Alfred Schweitzer were both the same sort of men, because each was a heterosexual. I don't see much resemblance between the two, but they both liked women, apparently. Hitler ate more little cakes than Schweitzer and had a tendency to wait, but they were both heterosexuals and actually have nothing in common. What does Oscar Wilde have in common with Frederick the Great? Practically nothing at all that I can think of. Yet each shared a liking for young men. So there is no such thing. And one of the reasons in America I'm often criticized by the gay liberation movement, which is a powerful one, which I highly favor for the changing of laws, and discrimination. But whenever they start talking to me about something called the gay sensibility, I reach for my revolver, as one of your famous Germans used to say whenever the word culture was used. I have witnessed in my professional lifetime, when I began, the novel was at the center of world culture. We'd push the poets out. The poets were out here, the novelists were here. I have watched in 30 years the film director, God help us, become the center of the culture, and the novelist is out here, and the poet is out there. Who knows? I assume that the maker of television commercials will ultimately be at the center of this culture. Well, here we are at Cinecittà. I must say this reminds me of 27 years ago when behind us was not a set from Casanova, but the Circus Maximus of Ben-Hur, which I was working as the writer. And that was the time I first met Federico Fellini. And he was doing La Dolce Vita also here. He'd never seen a big, vulgar Hollywood production like Ben-Hur, so he would come over with his great eyes and watch as we put together this fantastic Roman Empire. And I remember trying to tell the people from MGM who Fellini was. I said, haven't you seen La Strada? No. Don't you want to meet him? No. But Fellini wanted to meet all of us. He thought we were interesting. And he incorporated some of the madness of what was then called Hollywood on the Tiber. Then when it came time to do, well, first when we did Fellini Roma, he asked me would I act in it. Gorino, he calls me. I call him Fred. And I said, yes, I will act in it for you. I'll play myself. We'll talk about Rome. I did a play on television, which was rather successful years ago, called The Death of Billy the Kid, with Paul Newman. It was the beginning of Newman's career and the beginning of my career as a dramatist. And Newman and I went to Warner Brothers, and they were very reluctant to take it. It was the first sort of strange Western ever made. Well, we hired a director whom I didn't much want, who'd only done television, called Arthur Penn. Then I went off to do a play. Having prepared the first draft of the script, I come back to find that Arthur Penn has talked Paul Newman into bringing in another writer just to make a mess of the script so that it can be un film to Arthur Penn. That was when I first realized that the French virus had struck in the United States. And Arthur Penn, who is at best second-rate, suddenly becomes, with the left-handed gun called Le Gaucher in France, beloved of the Cahiers du Cinema, and now he is a great creator of the films, except that what he did was Gore Vidal's Death of Billy the Kid. It was not Arthur Penn's Death of Billy the Kid. So ultimately it comes down to the script, and except for those creators who are able to write and to direct, the director is sometimes very useful, sometimes not at all useful, sometimes completely on his own, like Fellini. We have in the background Casanova. I think of Fellini not as a filmmaker, or as a teller of stories. I think of him as a painter.
He takes celluloid. He's the last of the great mannerist masters. He takes celluloid and he paints and paints and paints. He doesn't need a story. He doesn't need actors. But there's only one Fellini, and there are a lot of Arthur Penns.